It all started in November 2018 when we sauntered up to this abandoned Victorian townhouse with its wild, overgrown gardens and bleak insides, cold, empty and lonely. It had been beckoning me for months as I stared longingly at it online, every evening envisioning what it would be like to arrive home from work there, imagining and reimagining the decorated walls, what it would have been like in its prime when scullery maids lit the fires and bells rang for supper. A project to fill this home with love, joy and decidedly better decoration than sporting on that wet grey November day in 2018. Welcome to the Bluestone Villa and to the reveal and tour of a tiny hidden space in our old home. Welcome to probably one of the smallest spaces in our 140-year-old house that we'll be giving you a tour of, and that is of course the space underneath our stairs, and it's a project that we've been working on since 2021. It hasn't actually taken us 2 years to do, but there were a couple of finishing touches that we didn't quite get around to that I shared in my last video. And now I thought it would be a perfect time to give you the final tour and reveal of this space. If you'd like to see the full series of us transforming this understairs space, then I will link that series below for you to catch up on. But otherwise, I thought we'd go back in time and first remind ourselves of exactly what we were working with in here, because it quite honestly was disgusting. There was absolutely no other word for it. It was repulsive. Our house was empty the 18 months prior to us moving in. It was rented out between 8 to 10 years prior to that, and it was very bleak. It was very scuffed, dirty, cold, a little bit grimy, and this cupboard I would probably say was the worst of it. I don't really recall whether we actually cleaned this cupboard before we put stuff in when we moved in, but I can only assume that we didn't, because when we came to do this project in 2021 I was absolutely horrified. This whole hallway when you walked in kind of smelt like smelly feet meets wet dog. It's probably the best description, and we got rid of that smell quite early doors. And then when we came to do this cupboard in 2021 we were reminded of what that smell was like, whilst it was kind of an understairs cupboard for coats and what have you. Even back there it was just completely dysfunctional. So we had coat hooks up on the door here and coat hooks also on this side here, and that's what the previous owners or the renters or whoever had put up, but it just was useless because, you know, even between James and I we have absolutely tons of coats, and so we had loads of coats hanging off of here and loads of coats hanging off here, and what that did was it just made the entrance to this cupboard space really tiny, so it just wasn't really easy to kind of access. I also talked about the fact that our hallway is actually really small considering the size of our house, and so there really isn't anywhere to put coats and bags and shoes in the hallway space itself, and so that's why we really wanted to make this work for our lifestyle, but also adding a touch of Bluestone Villa to it, in that I really wanted to make it really pleasing to the eye as well. So what we did was we ended up using, I think it's actually called tongue and groove. I've called it shiplap I think through most of the videos, but I think it's technically tongue and groove because we've put this up portrait. Yeah, I think that's the word, a portrait rather than landscape. So I think if it's landscape, it's shiplap, and then if it's portrait, or vertical. If it's vertical, then it's tongue and groove. And I actually got this idea last minute from another creator on YouTube called Laura Malhuish-Sprague, who is also doing a Victorian house renovation. I feel like a lot of the stuff that she's been doing kind of, it resonates with us so much here. We've retained our original Victorian skirting boards that's in this cupboard, but then we've put this kind of tongue and groove around, and we've also placed it on the ceiling as well. Then we have painted all of that in brilliant white by Jula. I've shared before that kind of, if I was to do any of the projects here again, I would maybe use a warmer white this time around. But I actually think brilliant white works perfectly in here because it is actually a really, really dark space. I'm lit currently by one small lamp over here, and the hallway light behind you, kind of late Sunday afternoon at the moment. And then we have painted our floorboards. So we have had our floors restored all throughout the downstairs of our house. So they are all original Victorian floorboards, and they were completely untouched, so they've never been restored before. But our restorers said they wouldn't come in and restore cupboard space like this. I love actually the transition between the restored floorboards and then the paint over here, and it kind of just then syncs up with other things we've done in the house. The floor, we have used the same floor paint on the stairs as we have here, which is a Rust-Oleum paint, and it is chalk white, I believe. And what's really great about that paint is that you don't actually need to do an awful lot of prep work in order to put it on. I did a little bit in this space because there were some water stains and what have you, so I did use some Zinza before putting that down, but ultimately, mostly you can kind of just paint it on. Then in terms of other things that we did on kind of walls and floors, we changed the plug sockets that we have in here to the brass sockets that we have throughout, and I think that's almost it before we get to some of our more decorative pieces in this space. So as I said, one of the things that we really wanted to do with this was to make it fully functional for our lifestyle, but also make it really pleasing on the eye and something that you would feel really proud if you had the door open when you've got guests coming in. So we first of all have moved our coat hooks, which were completely dysfunctional, to above me here. The coat hooks are actually one of the most important design features for me because it was something that I had thought about back before we'd ever started this project, which was I really wanted to spell our street name out on these coat hooks. So we have way more coat hooks than you would ever usually need or have in a space like this. If we weren't doing that, I wouldn't have had as many coat hooks as I do have. The only shame with that is I can't show you it in its absolute full beauty because I think it's probably wise I don't put our house address on the internet. Obviously, poetic license, I've got no coats hanging here right now because I wanted to be able to just talk through this video properly. And I have my lovely dried hydrangeas hanging here because I kind of had this like romantic vision in my head when we did this cupboard that I would have like dried flowers and lavender and stuff like hanging from some of the hooks, but the reality is once we've got our coats in here, that absolutely isn't happening, and it would cause such a mess and James would be horrified at me. So I'm just creating that illusion now for this video. And then below our coat hooks is this bench that I'm sitting on. Probably a bit of a renovation regret for me is that I think we've made the bench slightly too high. My feet are kind of dangling rather than resting on the floor, but we actually made this bench. It's actually a bench meets chest, so I really wanted to create a space in here that we could sit down and put our shoes on rather than having to take turns sitting on the stairs and putting shoes on there. So I really wanted to create a space here that we could change our shoes. I also really wanted to create a space that we could leave bags, like work bags, handbags, etc. because again, they tend to clog up the coat hook or they get kind of just dumped outside in the hallway. Beneath me, this actually lifts up. It's a lid, so it lifts up, and so we can put bags and stuff in there and hide them away, but also know that they're completely accessible, know where they are. There's no kind of panic when we're about to leave the house that where did I put that bag, where did I move it to, what have you. And then we can also sit on this to do our shoes. And I have just got our new cushion to go on the top here. So I actually made this cushion myself. It's probably not the hardiest of cushions, and getting somebody to make it professionally would have been far better, but I just decided that for a cupboard I could just do this myself. I've bought kind of a firm sofa foam that I just bought on the internet, and then I've bought a Sophie Allport fabric to go on top. It is oak leaves and acorns, and it's actually part of her National Trust collaboration. So the National Trust also gets some money from that when you buy that fabric, and I bought a couple of meters of that. I've actually got quite a bit left over. And then I've sealed it with this kind of linen or fabric Velcro. So you kind of stick it down and then it Velcros it closed, and I kind of wrapped it up a bit like a present underneath. I went for that because I am not somebody that is good at sewing or anything like that, and I don't have things like a sewing machine, so I wanted something that was a no-sew solution. And I had initially not wanted to put it onto a piece of wood and staple gun it, and I thought this way, with this fabric Velcro, you can also take it off, and I believe you can put it in the wash with the Velcro on even. So I thought that was a really good good idea, especially if you felt that this had got grubby or what have you, that you'd be able to do that. However, I think in retrospect, now that I have it on, I've not been able to pull the fabric as tight to the foam as I would like. So like me sitting on this right now, I know I'm like creasing the fabric along here. And so I think we are going to get a very, very thin piece of ply that we can put underneath the foam and then wrap the fabric around and then staple gun it. So I am going to make amendments to that. And then moving on to the space to my left, which is where we store now all of our shoes. So this space over here, I really love the idea of having kind of like reclaimed scaffold boards, or I had actually planned to use some old floorboards that came from our neighbours. But we hadn't started on this project, and James decided he was going to start a project of his own, and he made us a log store and he used those floorboards. So in the end, we ended up buying brand new, I don't actually recall what type of wood it is, but it was a very like white looking wood. It was really, really pale, and I got kind of a varnish that I've then varnished them up, given them a bit of a warmer look and colour to them. And then we've used those. We've used really, really cheap, basic, brassy, coppery kind of brackets. They're metal brackets that we just got from Wix, but they look great. I think it fits the vibe really, really nicely. And then what we've done is we've got, wait a second, 1, 2, 3, 4. We've got 4 shelves, and we have all of our shoes lined up here, and they kind of like are done in a style that is not shoe shop. Shoe shops would be much nicer, but you know, that kind of style. And then on the shelves also, I have a couple of baskets, one that houses some of our kind of flat shoes and flip-flops, that kind of thing, and one that has hats and gloves and what have you. And then we also have another 3 baskets that sit underneath the shelves, which also act as storage for things like extra cleaning stuff, candles, first aid kit, all that jazz. Hilariously, when I was editing our last installment of this renovation series, which was my last video, I was watching back the full series just to remind myself of some of the things that had happened, so that I could kind of tell that story how I wanted to last time. And one of the videos I share our mood board, or my mood board, and I had these baskets on the shelves, and I say in this video, oh, this is like kind of like poetic license that I've put these baskets on these shelves. I'm only doing that because basically on the mood board itself, I couldn't demonstrate the baskets underneath the shelves. So I was like, so I've just put them on the shelves for the sake of like sharing kind of the look and feel together, but they'll actually sit underneath the shelves, not on the shelves, because I don't want to take up any space. And I'd obviously completely forgotten that I'd said that. I'd completely forgotten that that was actually the intention. And in my head, when I went and bought our baskets earlier this year, I just had this vision of this mood board in my head. So I bought extra baskets to put on the shelves themselves as well. And it was only when I watched it back a week or so ago that I was like, I was never ever putting those baskets on these shelves. Saying that, I think it looks kind of a lot nicer on these shelves like that. I think it really adds a little bit of texture, it adds a little bit of point of difference. It doesn't make it completely flat and just kind of one-dimensional. So I actually kind of really love the baskets now. So a happy accident, I think. And then I have my light, which I will share here as well. I might just, oh, I can't turn off. Oh, it's very sensitive. My light, if if you can see that. I'll put it back because it makes it quite bright. So my light is just a cordless rechargeable lamp that I bought from Amazon. It was £34. I did that because we have electric in this cupboard. We've got the plug sockets, as I mentioned, but we don't have any overhead electrics. So I'd initially planned on having a hanging light bulb on a long cord that would be plugged in. But the one I bought, sadly, the switch was just so close to the plug socket that it kind of made it pointless, and I didn't really want that. So we abandoned ship on that one, and we were having to rethink what we might do. And in that time, these kind of cordless rechargeable lamps have become a bit of a thing. You can get some really, really fancy, nice ones from brands like Pookie, which I absolutely love, but I thought for the sake of it being trapped in a cupboard for its entire lifetime, I figured just a £34 one from Amazon would do. Then we have some other storage bits and pieces that are kind of shoved down the end, but we have some really, really sneaky ways of how you can get to it. So that stuff isn't as attractive as the rest of the cupboard, but we have I can't really open it right now because I've got something leaning on it, I think, but James has made our paneling here. It's actually a secret door, so we can get to that stuff from here if we need to. And then we also have another secret door just down next to you here, which when I say has always been there, I mean has always been there since we've lived here, which is access to our gas meter. There are actually 3 doors into this cupboard. I hope you enjoy seeing the transformation of this space. If you've got any questions, please let me know below. Happy to answer them, and I've linked everything that we've purchased in the description box below as well. And I look forward to seeing you next time here at the Bluestone Villa.